Hey, what's going on everyone? So in this video, we are finally going to configure our search form. So in the homepage or the profiles page, we are going to search developers by certain attributes like the name or description, and also by developer skills. And then in the projects page, we want to search projects by title, also by the description attributes, and by things like the tags associated with it, and even the developers. So let's go ahead and start building this in. And before we do, I want to make a quick note here. So we are going to basically hand code this entire form and customize it. But there is a library out there called Django Filter. So I just want to pull this up really quick. And this is a really cool library that helps you create forms kind of like a Django model form, where really they handle all the functionality for you. And you can do something like this where you would create a class here and simply create an entire form based on a model. So it looks a lot like a model form, except for we're inheriting from a Django filter, and that makes things pretty simple. So I do have a video on that on my YouTube channel, so go check that one out. I'll link it up here or put the picture here so you can search for it. But what I want to do is customize this, so we're just going to do this do this by hand. So let's go ahead and get started. So we'll go into our template here, and what I want to do is check out this form and see what's going on here. So if we go into our users app, let's go into templates, and let's open up, let's see, where was that? Profiles.html. So in this page, we have our main tag, and then we have this section, which we would call the hero section, and then we have our title. And down here is where we have our form. So we can see this form opens and closes right here. And the first thing we want to do is take a look at that name value. So we want to see what that name is going to be like. So when we get that get method, we want to know what to actually get it by. So that's going to be search_query. So if you want to change that, you can. Just make sure that you know the name that you're sending to the backend. And then we want to check the method here. So this is going to be a get method. We're simply trying to make a query, so we're not sending like post data. So we can use the get method, and then the action, we can either leave that blank or send the URL to the profiles page. So let's just do URL, and we're going to profiles. So this is going to send a get request to the backend here. So if I go ahead and refresh it, let's actually see what this looks like. So if we try to search for Dennis here, let's just type that in, and here we'll see our query. So it's going to be a question mark, and then we're going to see the name, so that's search query, and then the value. So we just want to extract that value. So let's go into the views now, and we can just go ahead and open up views.py, and let's find profiles. So the profiles view. So in here, the first thing I want to do is set a variable, and this is going to be called search_query. And let's set this to an empty string. So this search query will actually be passed into the filter that we add basically on every request. But if we don't have any data from the front end, we want to make sure it's an empty string so it doesn't actually ruin our filter. So what I want to do here is actually get what we have being sent in the front end. So we'll just do if request. So if request.get. So just like that. So we did request.post a lot. So now we're going to do request.get. And then we're going to use the get method, and we want to extract that value that's going to be sent in. So we want to extract search_query. So if we have it, let's go ahead and print this out. So if we get a query from the front end, let's go ahead and set the variable of search query to what we get from the front end. So I'm just going to take this value and paste it in. So the only reason why we're running this check is to see if we have anything, and we'll change that from an empty string to what we have in the front end. So that basically means let's apply this filter. So now let's go ahead and print out search here, and we'll just pass in search query. And let me actually change that indentation so we can always print that. So if I save this and open up my terminal, let's see what that looks like just to make sure we're actually getting that value. So let's quickly just clear this. So we'll just go back to the home page like that. And I just ran that, and at this point there's nothing in our search form, so we don't see anything here. So it's just an empty search. Now if I type in Dennis, we should be able to see that, and there we go. So we just want to get this value right here and actually run a search here. So we're going to use something called QLOOKUP, so we can actually search by multiple parameters. But before we do that, we just want to test the filter here. So we'll just do profile, and then profile.objects, and we'll just use the standard Django query here, or I guess the filter. So we'll just do .filter, and let's search this by the name. So we'll just do name_I contains. So we're going to do I contains because we want this to not be case sensitive. So we want that basically to not care about case sensitivity. And let's pass in the search query. So we'll just do search underscore query. So if this is an empty string, we're going to get back all the profiles because all the profiles contain something like this. So basically there's nothing to search for. And if we do have a value, it's just going to check the name here and then run that search. So let's go ahead and actually run a search here. So we'll clear this again and let's just do this. We'll just do Dennis and there we go. So now we get Dennis right there. So let's try that again. So at this point, let's just add in D to the search parameter. We'll search that and now we see that John Doe contains a D somewhere in the title. So that search actually works here. So what I want to do before we actually add in the QLOOKUP method here, let's pass in the search query in the front end. So you see how when I search, it just goes away from the form, but it stays in here. Well, we want the form to continue to have that. It's nice to know what we just searched for. Typically, you would still see the values in there. So let's just pass this into the template. So we'll just throw that in to the context dictionary. And then let's just go ahead and go into profiles here. And then in this search form, in this input, we'll just set the value to search query. So we'll just throw that in probably right before the placeholder. So we'll just say value. And let's pass this in. So we're passing that into the context dictionary so we have access to it now. And there we go. Okay, so now when we search, that should stay in the form. So we have a basic search filter here. So if I change that to D, now we're still seeing it, and that looks good. So what if I want to search by the name and then that short intro? So the problem here is if I try to change this filter to add a second parameter, let's just try this. So if I take name underscore I contains and then add a comma here. So if we just do this and then we change this to short underscore description or short intro, I always forget what this is called. So I think it's short intro. Let's check the model. So let's see, short intro. Yeah. So if I run that and just do this by adding in a second parameter here, by adding in the comma, the problem with this is that both of the fields have to have that value. So at this point, we don't have enough here because we just have two profiles, but both of these contain a D here. So let's try looking this up by the value of, let's see, what's something that both of these have. We can try going by N. So let's try this. Okay, so that did not work. Why didn't that work? Well, there's an N in Dennis here, so we see that, but the N does not exist in the description, if I'm not mistaken here. And then John also has an N, but it's not in the description. So we would typically want this search to work because that letter is somewhere in the title there or in the name. So what we can do is use a QLOOKUP, and this basically helps us extend our searches. And we can use something called OR. So in this filter, let's actually go back here. So we want this to say look up the profile by either the name or the short intro. And at this point, it's basically an AND method. So it's basically saying the name and the short intro have to contain that query. So we don't want to do that. So let's go ahead and import that. So we'll just bring this up here and I'll show you what this is going to look like. So we'll just go ahead and do from Django.db.models, and we're just going to import Q. So we'll just do Q like that, capital Q. So now we can bring this down here, and we basically want to wrap our searches here. So we'll go back to profile, and let's just do this. We'll wrap this in a capital Q, and then we want to close it off right here. And we can do the same for this one right here. So we'll just take Q, capital Q, wrap it in the parentheses here. We want to close that up here. And we want to add in a second one right there. So now inside of the filter, we basically wrapped both of those. And instead of doing the comma here, we have two options here. So we could do and we could do or like that. So a pipe will say, as long as the name contains that search or the short intro contains that search. So let's try that again. And I believe the letter was N that we were using. So let's try that again. So now we'll just do N, and there we go. So the title doesn't have it, but the description doesn't have it, or the short intro doesn't have it, but the title does. So that search filter still works. So that's going to be very convenient later on. So what we want to do now is actually search the developers by their skills here. And this is going to be a little bit different because this isn't an attribute of a developer. It's a child object, so it's an entirely different table in the database. So we're going to have to change a few things up in our view here. So what we'll need to do is search the profiles and the skills together and then see if the profile contains one of these skills. So let's go into the view here, and just underneath our condition here, above our profiles filter, let's go ahead and first search the skills here. So we'll just do skills, and that's going to be skill.objects.filter. And we want to first find the skill and see if it's in this search query. So we'll just do name _I exact, and that needs to be the query. So we only want to search our skills here if that query matches perfectly. So we also need to import that model. So let's go up here and let's just pass in the skill model. So let's bring this down here and let's see. Now that we have our skills, so we're going to query the skills and then we're also going to query the profiles. So to actually check if these profiles have one of these skills here, so basically we're going to have a query set of skills here and we want to know, does the current profile that we're filtering through have this specific skill or one of those skills? So let's go ahead and add to this filter now. So we'll just go ahead and create some space here and we'll move this down here. I'll just make sure that pipe is set at the end right here. We'll add another one. So that's going to be an OR statement. And let's just use the QLOOKUP filter again. So in this case, what we're going to do is we'll just say skill, and you can actually filter by child objects this way. So we're going to do skill _, and then we'll just do in, and then we'll just do skills. So we want to know, does the profile have a skill that's listed in this query set? So it's as simple as that. So this is going to work sort of at this point, and then we're actually going to have to fix it a little bit. So we'll save this, and I'm going to show you an issue that occurs here. So let's go ahead and start fresh here. And look what happens. Before we even run a filter, we are seeing a bunch of duplicates. So let's say we look up Django, and now we are seeing the filter, but because we have this entire query set, what's happening here is we're getting duplicates because of the skills here. So to actually fix this, we could use something called distinct. So I'll just bring this in the frame here. And distinct just basically makes sure that anytime we get a query set, we don't get any duplicates. So we just return back one table for each instance or one table object, and that's it. So again, we're getting the duplicates because of the skills right here, and that's causing it because there are multiple skills. So it doesn't realize what it's doing, and it's just trying to find every profile that matches it. And each time we find a new skill, it just renders out another instance of that profile. So before objects right here, let's go ahead, or before our filter, let's just do distinct. So just do distinct like that, and then just add in the dot there. And that should ensure that we only get one instance of each user. So let's refresh that. And there we go. So now we get one instance of each user. If we want to find every React developer, we can see that by the skill here. And if we want to find every Django developer, there we go. So now it's working and we're not getting the duplicates. I think we could even do an I_contains match here. So we're using I to make sure that it's case insensitive. Let's just do I_contains and make sure that this doesn't actually break our filters. So we'll do I_contains. Okay, let's see how that works. So I want to be able to start typing out Django and see if I get the developer. So that should also still work. For some reason, I thought that was going to give me an error, but that looks actually pretty good. So we get every React developer. Let's type in React all the way. And at this point, Dennis is the only React developer. So let's try Python. We'll do a partial search for that. Okay, so we are able to search by the skills. We can search by a developer, and everything looks good. So what I want to do next before we actually get to the projects filter is clean up the code here. So let's open up our views.py file. And if we look into our profiles views, we have all this logic in here, and what I want to do is actually extract all this into its own function and then simply import that function into our views file, and then we're just going to trigger like a search function, and that'll take care of everything for us. So in theory, we don't have to do this, but our code is starting to get a little bit messy, and the more logic we add, the more our views files will start looking like a mess here. So at this point, it's not too bad here, because we've separated our code from the projects and we haven't added that much yet, but it can get pretty bad here. So I just want to show you how to actually set this up. So inside of our users app here, what we're going to do is create an external file, and this is going to be like a utilities file, and it'll just contain like helper functions that we create. So we'll just do utils.py, and this can be called whatever you want. I just want to call it that just because that's the way I learned it originally. And in this view here, what we're going to do is we're just going to create a function, and it's going to be called search projects. So this function right here will simply be in charge of executing all this code. So we just want to execute that function in our view now. So in here, what we need here is we actually need access to the request object here. So we are going to pass that into this function. So we'll pass in request so we can actually get that from, or the searches here. So anything like that. So we need access to that. So we'll pass in request, and then the return value will simply be the profiles, and then it'll be the search underscore query. So this function will perform all the searches and then return back a query set and the actual value. So we can just do comma, and then we can extract it this way. So now what I want to do is go ahead and grab all this right here. So let's start from down here, and let's take all this code. I'm going to copy that, or I can just do cut. That's going to get rid of it from our profiles view here, and let's just paste that in here. So we'll paste it and make sure all the indentation is correct here. And now all this code will execute in here, and we have access to request.get because we are going to pass in the request object. So in here, what I need to do is make sure I import the profiles and the skill. So we'll just do from.models import profile, and then we can just do skill. Then we also need to import the QLOOKUP method. And at this point, I can actually get rid of skill here because we won't use it. And I'm just going to grab this right here. So these two need to be imported, and I'll put this above it. So now we have full access to all this. And now what I can do, because we're in the users app, it's right here, utils.py. I'm going to go into my views here, and we'll just import that function. So we'll just do from.utils, and we will just import search projects. Or profiles. Okay, we need to change this name. Sorry about that. So profiles. And I'll just go back to utils, and we will do profiles. Those two words, that's too similar, and it always just throws me off. So we have profiles here. Let's make sure all the naming is correct. So we'll save the utils.py, and we'll save this right here. So search profiles. Let's copy this right here because that import looks a little bit weird. Whoops. Okay. Copy, Control C. And then we'll paste it in here. Okay, so we have that function. So now what we can do is go back into our profiles here, and I can just do this. I can do profiles, and then I can do search query, search underscore query, and this is going to be set to the return value of search profiles. And search profiles needs this request object. So now all we do is trigger this function. It'll give us back the query set and that search query because that's what the function returns. So let's just make sure that this is working. So we have it imported, and it's still all the same logic. So at this point, let's just try SAM. Okay, we'll go ahead and try a skill. We'll just do React, or at least start typing it in, and everything's working. So that looks good. Our profile search works. So now what we want to do is go back into our projects and do pretty much the same thing. So in our projects, let's go ahead and close these out so we can close out models. I'll keep utils.py open because the logic's going to look the same here. And we can close out profile.html. So let's go into our projects app. And in our projects app, we'll go into views here. And what I want to do is first import the Q method here. So let's just copy this because we are going to use this. We'll bring that just above our models import. And we need to import a tag. So at some point we are going to search projects by tag. So make sure that's imported. So in our projects view now, what we want to do is actually get the search from the front end and start that filter process. So what I want to do is first go into the templates here and make sure the template is sending the search query. So we'll go into projects and we'll go into templates, and we are going into projects.html. So here is the search form for the projects. It's at the top here. Here we have search projects and then the actual input value here. So let's go in here and we just want to make sure the name is search query. So that looks good. We are sending a get request here. So the method will be get, and the action, we just want to update this. So I'll just set the URL to the current page we're on. So we'll just do URL, and then this is going to be sent to projects. So the template looks good. We're sending the GET request. We know where that's going. And in the view, I'll actually go back to the users apps utils.py file, and I'm just going to copy this right here. So this is going to be the same. So we'll go back into our projects app here in the views, and let's just go ahead and fix this indentation. And we want to get that search query. So that template is going to send in the GET request, and it's going to be called search query. So we have an empty string. We check if we have one. And now we want to finish this process up. So for projects here, we'll create some space, and let's just change this to filter. So now we want to actually filter down some data. So we are going to use the QLOOKUP method. So we'll pass one of these in, and we will use a couple of OR statements. So we'll set the title to _I contains. And remember, we use I contains to make sure that it's case insensitive. And we're just going to pass in search query. So what we pass in from the front end, we want to make sure the title contains it. Then we can add in the OR statement, so a pipe like that. Let's go ahead and also look up by description. So we'll just do description. And then this is going to be _I contains. And then that'll also be the search query. And for the last one, we want to also search up by the project owner. So if I go back here, if I go to projects, we want to make sure that we can type something like Dennis to get all of Dennis's projects here. So let's go ahead and go one level up here, and we can actually query by the parent item here. So in this case, we will just do owner, and that's going to be _name. So we're going into the parent object, and then we're going into that attribute of name. And then we do another _, and we're just going to do I contains. So give us every project where the owner's name contains, and then that's going to be the search query. So we'll just do contains like that. And then we need to set the equals to value and then search query. So we also want to make sure that when we fill out that form, that the initial search stays in that form so we can see what we did. I just feel like it's better UI. So we'll pass in the search query into the template, and we need to set the value of this form. So we did this in the project search form. So let's add that into, or the profile search form. And now we want to go into projects, and let's just add that into this input value. So at this point, we don't have it. So let's just go ahead and add in value. And then this will be search query. So search _ query, and that'll stay. So if I close this out, now we should be able to search by the owner, by the description, and the title. So let's go ahead and give this a test. So if we go up here, let's go ahead and just refresh it. And let's just start by looking up by project title. So we'll start by typing in yoga here. So we'll just do yoga, and there we go. So that works by the title. Let's say I want to get all of Dennis's projects. So I can do Dennis. So I see Dennis Ivanov. If I want to get all of John's projects, let's just type in John. And it looks like it's all working perfect. So we have it by the description, title, and the owner. Now I want to start searching by the tags here. So any tag that's associated with a project. So what if I want to search up all of the Django projects? So if I can do Django like that, I get nothing at this point. So we have to do what we did with the skills originally in our developers here. And we want to find a project by a tag. So this is going to be pretty similar. The search is going to be a tad bit different for a tag though, because this is a child object rather than, or it's a many-to-many field rather than a child object. So a skill was a child of a profile. A tag is simply in a many-to-many field. So for this, we're just going to go ahead and get tags. So we'll do tag.objects.filter. And let's first filter the tags. So we'll just do filter. And we are going to filter the tags by the name. So we'll just do name _I contains. And this value is going to be set to the search query. So we are going to search the tags and the projects. But now that we have the tags, we're going to add in another OR statement, so a pipe. And let's use QLOOKUP again. And in this case, we can just do tags _in tags. So the project model has a attribute called tags here. So it's a many-to-many field. So that's what I meant by it's a little bit different from a skill. So we can just go into tags, and then we're saying in. So we want to know that this project, if we look at the tags query set in the project, does it contain a tag that's in this query set? So in this filter. So we're going to have the same issue where we will see duplicates now, because this is going to be an entire query set. So if I go ahead and refresh this, we're going to see that issue. So let's try that. Now we see a bunch of duplicates and we don't want this. So we can use that distinct method again. So if I search, it does work. So if I go to Django, it does give me all the Django projects. We can see Django and Django right there, but it's also going to give me those duplicates. So we want to fix that so we're not seeing all of this here. So let's go ahead and add that, and we can go right before the filter in the project. And we're just saying that if there's a duplicate, give us one instance of that specific result. So we'll just do distinct, and then we can do dot filter after. So that's going to ensure that we get no duplicates. So there we go. That looks good. So if I clear it, actually that is a cleared filter. We see CodeSniper, Yoga Vibe, Mumble, e-commerce, portfolio. If I try to search up a Django project, we'll start typing that in. So we'll do Django. Now we get all the Django projects, which all of them contain Django. So let's try React. So I just want to start typing it, and I accidentally hit F11. And if I hit search, there we go. So every project with React in it. So that's it for the search filter, but I also want to put this into an external file. So just like we did with our profiles, I don't want all this logic to be in our projects view. I simply want a function that's going to look like this. It'll just be search projects like that. And then we're simply going to call it here. So we'll just comment this out really quick, and we are going to create this function. So let's go ahead and go into the projects app, and we created a utils.py file for users, but we want to make one for our projects because this can be something we'll use later on. So we'll go into the projects app, basically all utility files for projects. So utils.py, and we need to create a few imports. So we'll do from.models, import project. And then we also want a tag here. And we also want that Q lookup method. So let's just take this right here, and I'm going to cut this. So we'll copy it, but we'll remove it because we don't need it in here anymore for now. And let's create the function. So this is going to be called search function. We'll call it, or search projects, And then we want to pass in request because we need access to that request object. And this is simply going to return back the projects. And it's going to return back the search query. So search_query. Okay, so now what I can do is take all this logic here. So everything from the end of this filter, we'll copy all that, and we'll just do cut. And let's paste that into this function now. So make sure the indentation is set up. So now we get the search query, which we return, and then the project. So if I save this, I can go ahead and import this. So we'll just go ahead and add that right here. We'll just do from.utils, and then we'll just import search projects. Now for this, I can actually call the function, but we need to get the return values. So we're going to set projects and search_query. And that's going to be set to what that function returns. So search projects, that needs to have an S there. And let's just make sure that it's working. So we'll save everything again. We'll close out the models here. Utils looks good here. So let's try this again. So we'll go ahead and run a search. Let's try Dennis. That's all working. We'll try Django. Okay, perfect. So we exported that into its own function. We have search for projects, for developers. So what we want to do next is actually build in some pagination. So when we get more than one search result here, we want to, not more than one, but when we have a number that's over, let's say 10 or something like that, we want to limit our search results to a certain amount of results here. Can't explain pagination for some reason, but basically we want to limit this and then add in some page buttons here so we can simply navigate through our projects and profiles. So projects and then profiles here. So we'll build that in the next video.